And the recording is in progress.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. We are
Thank
at
you.
a crucial point in the transition process, kicking off the CAT interpretation. I know you all are, well, most of you are probably familiar with this particular assessment, having taken it a few years ago. And one of the blessings of having an older cat is you can really look at both together and see what's changed, what stayed the same, what areas have you put some focus in on, and what is improved. So, looking forward to sharing this data with you today. I will introduce myself quickly. I'm Kim Bergstrand. I serve as the associate to the bishop for lay ministry. I also relate to congregations in the sort of eastern half of Massachusetts and Rhode Island for calls and transitions and general congregational care and supports. So today I'm wearing that hat for the calls and transitions process and working with you on this transition, which is a little bit more intensive in terms of discernment because you're not only moving forward in your transition process, looking to call process, you're also shifting from full-time to a half-time call. So we'll be talking a little bit about that during this meeting as well, and how these results may connect with that discernment process, and what are some realistic expectations as we move forward in terms of clergy responsibilities. So I often leave this time. We do have a prayer that's included in the CAT, but I will open up this time to see if anyone would like to offer a prayer as we begin. Looking for a volunteer.
Looks like, Sal, is that you? You might have to take yourself off mute.
I'll pray.
Yeah.
Thank you, Val.
You're welcome. Hi, Kim.
Hello.
Lord, thank you for our church and for all the ways your Holy Spirit seems to be in every pew and every corner, from pulpit to coffee hour. Thank you for all the ways people have so faithfully and generously stepped up. We can hardly wait to see what you are going to do next within us and among us. So be with us and continue to guide us in your name. Amen.
Amen. So a little bit about the CAT. The tool has been around for over 25 years, and it's mainly used with Protestant congregations, particularly mainline congregations. So the data pool that we're looking at will reflect denominations that have a similar theological perspective. So we're not comparing our answers to the questions and our responses with, say, like a Roman Catholic church. So similar mainline Protestant. I've been working with Holy Cow. I was trained as a CAT interpreter back in 2014. So I mainly do online interpretations for the ELCA, Lutheran congregations, but I've also done them for Episcopal congregations and Methodist congregations as well. So I'm hoping that everyone has received a copy of the report, either by email or perhaps a hard copy. If not, that's fine. You will receive an annotated copy of the report after the interpretation. So either later tonight or early tomorrow morning, you'll get something in an email. I'm going to share my screen, which and which will be the entire report. Will go page by page looking at it together. So it's really helpful that when you're online, if you have a report, you don't have to take every single note down that you see on screen. You'll receive a copy of that report with that information, that extra information included. But do feel free to take any notes that you may want to have for yourself. As I said, we'll go page by page.
Your iPad will be easier to.
Feel free to just jump in if you have a question. Because I'm not going to be able to see everybody on screen at the same time, it is fine to just say, "Hey, I have a question," and we'll pause. We go through rather quickly, and there will be some conversation, but I also recognize it takes a little time to process the data. So I will be available for questions for another, Zoom meeting or by email after this interpretation meeting as well. So we'll stop for questions. We'll stop for questions at the end. Feel free to just jump on in if anything is a little bit confusing or you want to just kind of talk about it more.
If I can interrupt for just a minute, Kim, just for those of us that are online, to my knowledge, the office has not received the raw data. And so I think the intention, and Thomas, correct me if I'm wrong, was to wait until we got the annotated report from Kim, and then that will be sent out. So don't go crazy looking in your emails, wondering where this report is.
I did send it to the transition team and to council
Okay,
about
Thank
10
you.
minutes ago.
okay.
There we are. Okay. So without further ado, I am going to share my screen and we can start at the beginning, as they say, right? So this particular report is I think almost identical to the one that you took in 2021. There are a few missing pages, and that was due to there was not enough response rate from certain demographics within the congregation. So we're missing some pages that broke down information on the priorities according to age demographic. So don't worry if you're looking at a report that you just got and you're saying like, this looks a little different. It is because they did not have enough data to generate those particular pages. So this first page here that says notions, this is a little quiz. A few assumptions about what a healthy and vital church looks like. All of the answers to this true and false are false. So this is a good conversation starter if you're talking about the results in a small group. You can just kind of put some of these statements out there and ask folks if they think they're true or false, and then you can reveal the answers. So it's a good way to just introduce the information. Here is a prayer. And thank you to Val for offering a prayer. So we'll go right to page 4, which is the key indicator page. This page gives a snapshot of, that answer to the question, so how are you doing? We look at satisfaction, we look at energy, and we look at active ministry beyond worship. So when you're looking at this page, we want to pay attention to the responses over on the right,
Kim, is
which
it possible that you can make your screen a little bit bigger?
bigger. Let me see. How is that? Is
Oh,
that
okay.
better?
Yeah, then we dropped the red. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, for whatever reason, it is not conducive to um,
All right.
that. Um, I'll explain it as much as possible. I did add the 2021 data in there so that we could compare. So the first question we're looking at is overall satisfaction. And the way that we look at this is on the whole, I'm satisfied with how things are in our church. What we see over to the right is 59% of the congregation clearly agrees. That means they indicated they strongly agree or agree with that statement. We have 40% on the fence. Those are folks that said they somewhat agree or somewhat disagree. And then 1% clearly disagrees. And so that would encompass the response disagree or strongly disagree. So the rating of church satisfaction level is high. What that means is compared to other congregations in the database, the way that this congregation rated their satisfaction was higher than most other congregations. So you can see in my little notes here, includes that database includes over 2,800 congregations, all regions in the United States, not just New England, within the last 6 or so years. So when we look at that, say how you're doing quite well. Folks are feeling very satisfied with how things are in the church. So when we look at 2021, you had somewhat similar response with your rating was high. You had 71%, so you had some more folks on the clearly agree side at that point, and 26% in the middle on the fence.
Kim, I'm
Anything?
sorry to interrupt again, but how many respondents did Holy Cow receive on our survey?
72. So
Okay,
it was a
thank you.
97% response rate. And they based that on average worship attendance.
Okay, thank you.
This little owl up in the corner here, that refers to a publication called Owl Site, which is provided by the Holy Cow. And that's a deep dive. That particular publication is a deep dive into how they formulated this assessment, really talks a little bit about the statistics and some general trends within the assessment as well. The next indicator we look at is overall energy. And this is a negatively worded question. It seems to me we are just going through the motions of church activity. There isn't much excitement about it among our members. So we don't want folks agreeing with this statement. And you can see only 1% clearly agree. We have 31% on the fence and 68% clearly disagree with that statement. And the rating of the church energy levels, so that's compared to the congregations in the database, is very high. So folks are more energized and feeling more connected to the mission and purpose of this congregation than most in other congregations. And then you could see the responses in 2021. So actually the energy is a bit higher at this point. And when you think about it, that makes sense. When when we think back, what was going on in 2021? We were dealing with the effects of the pandemic. In general, folks were feeling sort of tired, and church was being church together was a bit more difficult during that period just before this. So we're looking at the attendance trend next. Compared with 3 years ago, I attend worship. 69%, it's the same, 17% less, and 14% said more. So when we're looking at the change, average annual change, it's down about 1%, so it's fairly stable. I will say, folks, tend to overestimate sometimes their their worship attendance. So there's like you know, maybe less than, there could be like a 5 to 10% difference in that. But overall, um, folks are attending just about the same. And then we look at 2021 and folks, there were more folks that were attending less, which again makes sense for where we were at that point in time. Did I hear a question?
Stimulant would call Greek fire, which is similar to napalm. We'll close it up, light a fuse.
If you're not speaking, if you can put your monitor on mute, that might help. It sounded like it was more background noise.
Okay. Just making sure I didn't miss anyone. So the next thing on our page here is the value of activity beyond worship. So this is engagement in programs, outreach, service, Christian formation, small groups, fellowship, etc. On the whole, participation in church activities is very meaningful to me. You have 69% that clearly agree, 23% on the fence, and 8% that disagree. So the rating there is high compared to other congregations in the database. And you've seen that there is quite a significant improvement in between 21 and 25. And partially a lot of folks may have indicated more on the fence there because of where we were in terms of the pandemic as well in your last assessment. Top 3 priorities. Number 1, make necessary changes to attract families with children and youth. The second, develop and implement a comprehensive strategy to reach new people. And number 3, provide more opportunities for Christian education and spiritual formation at every age and stage of life. So those 3 priorities are all what we call growth priorities. We're looking to expand, bring in more people to the life of the church. That third priority has a focus in on education. So the question here is it about education opportunities that are potentially lacking, or is it a general priority for growth? So one of the things we notice about this particular priority is folks sometimes are thinking of a time in the past when there was a full Sunday school or 20 children in a confirmation class, and they're visioning forward that sort of nostalgia, like if you build it they will come. So the question here is, do you have a lack of those because of the folks in the congregation are looking for that, or is it more of like nostalgia for the past? We need these programs, even though you may not have folks that are looking for them. So that's something to tease out among the congregation. Now we look at 2021, you had the same 2 first and second priorities, but your third top priority was expand outreach ministries that provide direct services to those living on the margins. So that's a difference when we're looking for some shifts. We have education rising to the top, and then this outreach ministry priority and direct service lower on the priority list. And that could mean that you actually did expand your ministries, right? And you have more opportunities to serve those in your community.
Reveals that the oldest of the images dates back 27,000 years, and the people returned to the cave over and over again, adding to this art for over 14,000 years.
We'll go to the next page if nobody has any questions. We're going to dive into drivers. So drivers are like, I like to think about them as lenses, the way people look and experience, look at and experience being church together, and different focal points. So an example that they give in the assessment is buying a car. So when two people buy the car, they may be looking for different things. So every congregation has a different set of drivers. So when I'm looking for a car, I might be thinking about safety. I want the airbags, like all of them, everywhere. I might be looking for capacity because I might be driving around a bunch of kids and all of their gear. And then my husband might be looking at different things like what is the resale value? What is the gas mileage, right? We're both interested in this car and we'll both be driving this car, but we're kind of looking at it from different angles. So drivers are a little bit like that. They're kind of like unique fingerprints for your congregation. These are the ways that folks are really looking at how they're feeling connected to God, connected to one another when we think about satisfaction, and then energy, that where is the enthusiasm? Where is the motivation? What drives people to want to be a part of this ministry? So your first driver is persons who serve as leaders in our church are representative membership. So this corresponds to governance. And when we look over to the right, we see degree of focus high. So when Holy Cow is looking at certain questions within the assessment, some of those questions have a correlation to how folks answer that satisfaction key indicator question. So how satisfied they are with the congregation. So when we see this degree of focus, we know there's a higher correlation between how folks answer this question and how that folks answered that key indicator question on the last page. What this tells us, if there are any changes or shifts in how folks are feeling about this, it will impact that level of satisfaction in the congregation. It doesn't tell us how folks answered this question, whether they're agreeing or disagreeing. It just tells us that level of correlation with the key indicator question. Does that make sense to everyone? That's a little bit complicated.
Yeah.
Church discovered that in February of 1945, this sub, 2869, was in the Atlantic attacking shipping lanes off the coast of New Jersey.
See, Mary Jane,
Message.
could you?
And can we mute everybody and then
Yeah.
ask people to unmute as if they want to speak?
Allied some over 700 U-boats. That represents 75% of the entire German fleet.
Here we are. All right. Yeah, feel free to mute yourself if you have a question. So when we're looking at this, again, this degree of focus does not tell you how folks answered that question. It just tells you how strongly the responses to this question correlate to how folks responded to that key indicator question over here, which is, on the whole, I'm satisfied with how things are in our church. Same goes for the drivers down here of energy. Those correlate to how folks responded to that energy question. So any changes around these areas, you'll see some moderate or high impacts on satisfaction or energy. So the second driver, our church provides high quality education that's appropriate to every age and stage of life. We saw that as a priority as well. So we want to keep in mind, this is something really, really important to the congregation right now. It is going to impact their level of satisfaction And they'd like to see more resources and investment and energy put into this in the future. The worship services at our church are exceptional in both quality and spiritual content. So that relates to worship. And this is the overall worship expression. So the worship style, the settings, the liturgy, all of that is incorporated in that question. Driver number 4, the church provides opportunities for members to engage in active ministry within the church and in the world. That corresponds to the Readiness for Ministry Index, which we'll look at later in the report. Our church prepares our members for ministry by helping them discern their gifts. That's another question that is under Readiness for Ministry. And we'll look at specifically each one of these later on in the report when we get to those particular performance indexes. If we look at drivers of energy, our church prepares our members for ministry by helping them discern their gifts. So we saw that as satisfaction driver, also an energy driver. So we know, again, super important to this congregation. The whole spirit in our congregation makes people want to get as involved as possible. That relates to morale. Our interim pastor has ensured the development of a plan to care for members in times of need. That relates to hospitality. And I know it's hospitality. We think, well, hospitality, but hospitality in the sense is how hospitality are relationships with one another. The worship services at our church are exceptional in both quality and spiritual content. And we saw that up there in the satisfaction driver. And our interim pastor communicates with people in a way that keeps us informed and connected. And that relates strictly for communication. Any questions on that? So we're going to look right here at the
Kim, I'm sorry.
comparison. Oh, yeah.
Reaching for my mute button. Sorry about that.
Mhm.
It seems like we've got at least 2 of the drivers that show up in both satisfaction and energy. Is that typical? Is that significant?
That we see that a lot. It is significant because what that indicates is that those particular drivers, those particular areas of ministry are really important. So when you're thinking about making changes, you're thinking about exploring something new, experimenting, they're going to have some impact on the level of energy and satisfaction. Now, you hope it's always going to be positive, right? Right? We're always looking for the positive. But then again, if you neglect these things, right? And you just kind of get comfortable and you fall into routine, you could see decreasing levels of energy and satisfaction. So when we're thinking about worship, right? Like it doesn't tell us what people are thinking about worship. We'll look when we look at worship later in the report, we'll see how folks answered that. And as I mentioned, that area that's on the fence, are there people on the fence where maybe they're feeling positive one day and feeling like, oh, you know what, maybe we could do something new another day. So it's an opportunity to have some further conversations. But for right now, when we're looking at that, we know worship, readiness for ministry, those particular areas are of particular import in terms of energy and satisfaction for this congregation.
Kim,
Mm-hmm.
I gotta say, I thought having so many questions about our interim pastor so early, I felt like it was almost unfair to him to you, Thomas, because you haven't even had time to do all these things. Do you know what I mean? I was surprised there were so many about our interim pastor of what, 3 months or what is it, 4 months? I just didn't think it was fair. I don't think we've seen Thomas in all of those, areas. That's all.
And a way to think about this is in in a transition process, especially with a newer interim pastor, is these are some of the expectations people have for a pastor as well, right? So whether it is the person serving, but this is really like some of because it's new, the interim is new, then we can almost translate this into like these are also some of the expectations that people have in general for a leader in the congregation.
I also want to point out to Val's point, when we ordered the cat, there were certain questions or items that we needed to make a selection on.
Yes.
So we weren't going from a pastor and starting this right at the time that she resigned. So, we
Yeah.
weren't given a whole lot of options. So although Thomas has only been with us, I can't remember what it was, the beginning of June, we did have other interim people such as yourself, Val. And so unfortunately, we were kind of pigeonholed into what we could select in ordering the cat.
Correct. They don't have an in between, right? We have our former pastor and then basically the interim pastor, right? So yeah, and I take it more because it hasn't been a long interim pastor in place, right? We've had Val and we've had Thomas. This is a general um, a general feeling in terms of like expectations in a pastor. And we can kind of see this again in the earlier cat as well. Somewhat similar response in the drivers. So if we look at I just included this in the report, pulled this from the 2021. You could see there are different drivers, right? Just in these few years. In 2021, there were two drivers that were around conflict management, which are not even included in 2025. And that indicates, there was something within that period just prior where folks were really paying attention to like how are we dealing with disagreements or conflict, and that since then you've moved in a new direction, so you can look at that there. There were also drivers there relating to Pastor Ann. That communication piece is there, which we see in the energy driver coming, right? So it's still there, but it's moved from satisfaction to that energy driver. And then we also see here persons who serve as leaders are representative of the membership. So there's the same one, except this one is moved up from the bottom. So some of these things, the conflict management pieces, are no longer at the top, right? They're no longer in the list, and you've added new drivers, but retained the one about representative leaders. And here, if you look at drivers of energy, we see again the representative leaders. So you had that repeated in the drivers in 2021. And then you see this one, I sense an atmosphere of general care and concern among our members in times of personal need. And that actually relates again to this sort of pastoral care, hospitality one. So what I look at is within this time, there has been the development of the care team, which is a plan for care, right? And that here is highlighted again in this one. So just to look at the difference, there is a difference, and there were no other drivers of energy in 2021, and you have 3 new drivers in 2025. Now to map out the energy and satisfaction. So in 2021, you were here in this area, still high levels of energy, a high level of satisfaction. But what we've seen here is you have even higher levels of energy and a bit more satisfaction. So this puts you in the transformational quadrant. This is healthy and vital ministry. This is the diagnosis piece. You have healthy and vital ministry. And what we see here is an opportunity. You could serve as a mentor for other congregations. You're able to launch new programs and ministries. So there are no glaring internal issues. So some congregations really do have to address some internal issues before they can even think about trying something new. Your congregation is in a space where you're healthy, you have some momentum, folks actually have energy and capability to um, experiment and explore, and also to partner. We see a lot of partnership with these transformational congregations. So the key thing here is to keep your momentum going. You want to continually reevaluate the directions you're going in, your vision for ministry. Are we living into our mission and purpose? So critical success factors for even improving your satisfaction levels even more was that education for every age and stage of life. 2021 critical success factor was develop a tolerance of different opinions. So it was a conflict management. It's not a high level issue. If you look down below, you could see it's within that significant range, so it's nothing urgent, or even in that we need to address tomorrow or today. It's something to keep on your radar. And you can keep this on your radar. I mean, there's no reason why you can't think about this during a transition period, um, and have some conversations. If folks are looking for an opportunity that is really age appropriate or addresses a different stage in life, you could think about the opportunities that you're offering, and are there any gaps in that? It may not mean that you have to offer something completely new or different. It could be presented in a different way. And here's the list of priorities. So the first 3 we saw on the key indicator page. And I highlighted this because that really does also go along with that critical success factor. So we know it's high, it's a high priority, it's a high, it's a driver of satisfaction, it's a critical success factor. So anything you do around this to address this will have a pretty big impact on your congregation and the vitality of your congregation. So any positive movements will increase that satisfaction level even more. If we go down, yeah.
How often do we see number 57 and number 59 in the 1-2 position?
Those are about 95% of the time. So those are growth priorities. We all, I think, understand we want to have new families with and children and youth. We also always, we want to reach new people. This is go and make disciples. Like we're it's kind of in our DNA. So I tend to look at the priorities that are, down to the fourth, fifth, or sixth. Anything that I've had labeled here as a growth priority are fairly typical for congregations to put in their list of top priorities. Anything that we're looking here that is ranked higher or lower in terms of the database. So we're seeing these growth priorities, they're average, right? They're average in there. This third priority is also considered a growth priority because we're expanding, we want to provide more. Anything like this outreach priority, we work to renew and revitalize the community by building coalitions, and then expand outreach ministries that provide direct services. And we saw this in an earlier CAT. These two I would pay attention to as well. And we tend to look at things that are, closer to a mean of 3. So this is a ranking. They're taking the way the folks ranked them and kind of calculating the mean. So I look at things that are close to 3 or over 3 and above. As overall, for most folks, these are high priorities. People rank these somewhere near the top of the list, any combination of these. And then as we look down lower, we can see some priorities are ranked low compared to others in the database or very low. A couple of reasons for that could be that your congregation is already doing that well, so it's a lower priority, or it's a less of a priority for your congregation. So I'm thinking that these two, the 65, question 65, develop ministries that work toward healing and creating more opportunities to form meaningful relationships, small groups, fellowship activities, are some of the things that perhaps the congregation is already engaged in and within doing. Typically, we see property way here, down at the bottom, unless a congregation is thinking about expanding facilities or renovating, that tends to be at the bottom. And here we also see worship. We saw worship in the drivers. So this change or improved music, that is lower down. And then we see deepen our sense of connection to God, one another through stronger worship services. And that's sort of in the average range there, not as high a priority, but we know it's important to the congregation. And here you could see how the priorities changed. So the top 2 are the same. And then we have expand outreach ministries. We noticed that to provide direct services. And we saw that here at the bottom as the 5th in 2025. Meaningful relationships was a higher priority in 2021. Develop ministries that work toward healing. That was a higher priority, and work as an advocate, that was a higher priority. So we see some shifts here in priorities. Part of this, we saw this opportunities to form meaningful relationships actually rise to the top right after or during the pandemic. So we know that folks were feeling isolated during that time. And so that tended in general to be a higher priority for most congregations. Healing was also nearer to the top. So that makes sense for where we were back in 2021. But we see here now that time has gone by, um, these other priorities have risen to the top. So in thinking, again, thinking about these priorities, and as we go along, think about the approach, especially when we're thinking, about a leader. What are some skills and experience that might be needed in a pastor? In particular, we want skills and experience that align with some of those drivers, but also the priorities. Uh, and we need to temper our expectations, um, in a sense that this will be a halftime call. So when we're thinking about priorities and drivers of the and things that are of particular interest and import to the congregation, what are areas that are open for collaboration, where we can be partners in ministry, and what are some areas specifically that a pastor would be responsible for? We're going to look at the descriptive indices. So theological perspective, they give a range of more progressive to more conservative. And how they get to that is the questions they're putting out there are more conservative theological perspective. And you could see how folks answered all of those questions. There's no right or wrong answer in this. It is really a spectrum of responses that we get in the New England Synod and in the ELCA. We have more progressive congregations, we have more conservative congregations, and everything in between. What we do look at is theological diversity. I mean, are there different opinions and perspectives within your congregation? And from 2021, there was this concern about folks being able to have different perspectives and have a tolerance for different perspectives. And you can see there is some diversity in theological perspectives. We look at that with like, how are folks answering? Are there folks on the two ends of strongly agree with some of these statements or strongly disagree? Are folks in the middle? Are they tend to agree, tend to disagree? So what we're looking for are anyone at one end of the spectrum or the other end in the agree, strongly agree. And down here we can see, based on the answers that your congregation has given, you're on the more progressive side, for the most part, leaning progressive. But on average, theological diversity, so there is no there are no really disparate perspectives. You're not like a completely split congregation. There's sort of a good mix of folks there. The next thing we are looking at is flexibility. This is your ability to adapt in a variety of situations. So again, we're looking for mostly for folks to be more flexible. A healthy congregation really has that ability to adapt and pivot in a variety of situations. So down here, we see most of the folks are, when we're looking at the flexibility, are more adaptable. You're leaning more in that adaptable, a little more settled in the way you kind of get into routine, your established way of doing things, but on the whole, a high degree of flexibility. So when we put those two indices together, we come up with some general characteristics of a congregation. So we map out that flexibility and that theological perspective. And we can see here in 2021, you were square in the middle here. And now in 2025, increased your flexibility a bit more, and you're a little bit more in the middle in terms of theological perspective. So you're still within what we call this magi culture, but you're leaning more towards this performance culture here on the right. And that changes over time. It changes in terms of membership. It changes in terms of leadership and within, typically you can see some shifts within a 3 to 5 year period in the overall culture of the congregation. So some of the strengths, rational, known for advocacy, justice. Folks tend to be sort of more on the intellectual, theological side of things. When these cultures make up their mind, they can have powerful impact, either through service or advocacy. Efficient can develop a strategic plan and work through it. We think of deep sort of knowledge. Some of the weaknesses with this particular culture, they can come across as colder or aloof or impersonal. And one of the other weaknesses is I would say we want to get it right, so things get in committee and we're thinking of plan A, B, C, or D, and it may take a little while before we can move toward action because we're looking at contingencies all the time. So those are some of the weaknesses of this particular culture. But then again, here we're seeing a movement toward this more performance culture, so we can look down here and see some of the strengths and weaknesses of performance culture. Fun-loving, spontaneous, more experiential. One of the characteristics that I see a lot in performance culture is people will talk about transformation, how God is working in their lives, storytelling, relevant stories. Those are some of the things we'll see. Incorporation of the arts. I heard skits were part of worship today. So those are some of that performance culture characteristics. At its worst, so some of the weaknesses, follow through. So the good idea, but like, how do we break that down? So kind of like they may be very creative. We think of these the performance cultures as really creative, but breaking this down into like, how do we plan? What's the process? That kind of thing. They can also sometimes lack the theological depth. So that is a little bit about that performance culture. So I hazard to guess there's a little bit of a mix within your congregation of some of both of those cultures. Both cultures, though, one of the things that are areas for growth is that relational piece. So paying particular attention to developing interpersonal relationships is important for both. And also recognizing the emotional process of change and transformation as well. So that's a little bit of background on that culture. I've included a little bit more on the Magi culture, and I think I forgot. I'll add one on performance culture as well, and send that off. Any questions about culture? So it is a similar culture to where you were in 2021. When you're thinking about leadership in a Magi culture, and leadership actually in a Magi leaning more towards a performance culture, what I would say is you're looking for a leader that is bilingual. So I joke, there are folks that speak Magi, there are folks that speak performance, folks that speak different cultures. So Magi cultures respond to data. We're going to read through it. We're going to look at statistics. We're going to plan. We're going to do this written word, right? Performance culture is we're in the moment, in the experience, storytelling, narrative, those type of communication. So when you're looking for clergy, someone that feels comfortable in communicating with both cultures, also feels comfortable and has gifts and skills, be able to relate to both cultures. Next, we're going to look at performance indices. So earlier in the report, under the drivers, we saw specific questions that came from each one of these areas of ministry and congregational life. What this page does, it looks at your comparative profile data, so how overall your congregation responded in each one of these areas, and compares it to the other congregations in the database. So anything between 30 and 70% is sort of average. Anything above obviously is higher than average, and anything below 30 would be below average. So here you're seeing a snapshot where most of these gas gauges are above average in comparison with other congregations. I highlighted some of the areas that were seen in the drivers. So we had morale, governance, readiness for ministry, satisfaction and energy. And then down here, engagement in education, which was a critical success factor and also a satisfaction driver. And then worship and music, which was satisfaction and energy. So this is all compared to how your congregation responded to questions underneath each one of these areas, and comparing that to the responses in the database. And here, I know this is really small for folks that are at home, but you can kind of see how the gas gauges are the same or different in 2021, and then in 2025. You see they're very similar. Governance is much higher. Spiritual vitality is much higher. You move the gauge from one side to the other. And most of these things, the only one you see a little bit, moving more toward the 50th percentile is their engagement in education. So that is something we'll look at a little bit more closely in the report. Hospitality. So this related, even though this wasn't the exact driver we saw in the energy drivers, it related to the interim pastor, but I am including this in here. I sense an atmosphere of general care and concern among our members in times of personal need. We did see this rise to the top in 2021. And I want you to think about folks are feeling very positive here. So we see this down here. We see 0, 0, 0, 0, and then everybody's over here strongly agree. Feeling super good about about this. So now we know Whereas on the drivers, the energy and satisfaction drivers page, it just showed the degree of focus and the correlation with the satisfaction and energy indicator questions. Now we're seeing how folks responded. So we have majority of folks here. So what I want to say is, I think, I know you have the care team that is active in the congregation. I said you're probably going to need maintain focus there on that care team as you're going forward and thinking about a halftime call. How is this care team working as a partner with the pastor? The next one we're going to look at is morale. And we saw the energy driver, the whole spirit of our congregation makes people want to get in as involved as possible. And down here, we see how folks answered that question. You have some on the fence. Majority of folks are on the agree side. And if we look down here, even though you have a ton of people in the middle, they're leaning toward that agree side. And compared to the congregations in the database, you're over here at like 98th percentile, somewhere like that. So we know that folks are feeling energized, they're feeling connected to the mission and purpose when they feel involved in the ministry, right? So it's driving that energy within the congregation. So thinking about this, how do we leverage this? How do we leverage this? How do we make sure that folks are involved and connected, providing short-term and long-term opportunities for folks to serve? It's really thinking about this, because this really does impact how folks are feeling about energy in the congregation. They want to be involved. It feeds them. And again, on that spirit, right, of involvement, a leader and a pastor, how do you encourage? How do you motivate? How do you connect those folks, connect them with ministries where they can thrive? Conflict management. So we saw this come up in the 2021. It's not a driver in 2025. And we can see from the report, folks are feeling good and about the way that conflict is managed and handled in the congregation. I would say it's something to keep, you know, an eye on, and if you feel like there is disagreement, or you're sensing something within the congregation, using the skills that you've developed to be able to address it early, and head on, as we say, right? So nothing of concern at the time, but we know it's in the history where there was something that was driving energy and satisfaction. Governance. So we saw this come up in the satisfaction. Drivers, persons who serve as leaders, are representative of the membership, and we see majority of folks here again on the agree, strongly agree side, and the tend to agree. So the congregation's feeling very positive about leadership. And then down here in the comparative profile, you see again, you're like 97th percentile on that particular question. So as I would say, keep that momentum going, creating pathways for new leaders as you grow, and as you move through the process, and also like seeking out perspectives as you're thinking about the different discernment and transition to activities, making sure that folks are included in the decision-making process as well. Spiritual vitality. So for most New England Synod congregations, ELCA congregations, this indices tends to be low. We tend to be in like the 30th percentile. And what we're seeing here from you folks is about the, looks like the 77th percentile or so, where most of your folks here are responding to a lot of these questions on the agree side, except for this negatively worded question, the one that's starred. You want to see folks disagreeing there. So folks are feeling really good and positive. What you'll notice about these questions is they go from my congregation or our ministries to my experience, my spirituality. It is not about the whole, the faith community. It is about your personal experience. This doesn't tend to correlate directly with satisfaction and energy. We can have congregations with high levels of satisfaction and energy and very low spiritual vitality. What it does somewhat correlate with is generosity and stewardship. And sometimes we'll see a little bit connection with that hospitality, that care and concern for our fellow members. Readiness for ministry. So we had two questions here as drivers. The first one, our church prepares our members for ministry by helping them discern their gifts. We saw that come up in satisfaction and energy. Our church provides opportunities for members to engage in active ministry within the church and world. That was satisfaction driver and a high priority. So what we see here on number 2, discerning gifts, we see a lot of folks here on the fence. And what I say when we see that is there's opportunity for growth to kind of move people off the fence. So thinking about like how are we accompanying people in their discernment, in terms of their gifts and their skills and their talents? Is there a way to make this more relational? Conversations, discovering and exploring interests and talents together. Again, this is connected to equipping and empowering folks for ministry. We see also here in the second one, providing opportunities. There seem to be opportunities. Where the gap is perhaps connecting those folks with an opportunity where they feel like they can thrive and use their gifts. What you're looking for in a leader, in a pastor, would be somebody that could help with that equipping and empowering, helping folks, sitting down with folks and helping them discern how their gifts connect to the ministries and programs and outreach opportunities that are already existing, or is it empowering them to use those gifts to start something new? Educational engagement, we saw high priority, satisfaction driver, and critical success factor. So our church provides opportunities for education and formation for a variety of ways. So I could find one that fits my complex lifestyle. Our church provides high quality education that's appropriate to every age and stage of life. So when we look at that driver, we see some folks on the fence here, 27, about 50% are on the fence for the high quality education that's appropriate. So we know there's room for growth. And we see down here in the percentile, right, compared to other congregation, that response to the question is fairly low. So it's something to pay attention to. What perhaps is missing, where there's some gaps, and we're also taking care that this is not nostalgia, remembering a time when that we had Sunday schools and confirmation class with 20, 50, 100 kids. But what does it mean for your congregation today to have these opportunities for every age and stage of life? Again, this is not something you need to wait to do. You can have these conversations now. You can think about ways of addressing this during a transition process. And it may just be adapting things that you're already doing to be age appropriate. Worship and music. The worship services at our church are exceptional in both quality and spiritual content. So that is a satisfaction that was a satisfaction and energy driver. And this encompasses the whole worship experience. So it may be an opportunity here to seek additional input from the congregation. So we like to say that the CAT is the start of a conversation because it will point you in some directions where, the congregation may want more energy and time and resources invested. But it doesn't tell you exactly what they're looking for, right? So it's a conversation with folks to see what perhaps like they're looking for, and then because you have this high level of satisfaction and energy, you're able to experiment, with the liturgy, the style, the settings, maybe even the location, and have that flexibility. Folks aren't going to you say, we're going to try this for a couple of weeks, they'll probably be open to it. Next, we're looking at income and contributions. So you see these two graphs. What we're looking for is basically a mirror image. But what you're seeing here is folks are pretty generous within your congregation. Their average percent of income given is over 3.5%. And that puts your congregation in the 80th percentile rank compared to other congregations. National average is like 2.5%. In the Synod, it's about like 1.5 to 1.75.
Wow, we're twice.
Yeah. So that's very, very good. This is the demographic data that was supplied through the folks that completed the assessment. So again, it's not your whole congregation. It's just the folks that did participate in the assessment. Unfortunately, we couldn't break down all of those priorities into age groups because of the small percentage of folks that were in the different age groups. Majority of folks that responded to the assessment were over 65, and then 55 through 64 was the second biggest group. When we're looking at tenure, majority over 20 years, members over 20 years, and then the second biggest group is 5 to 10, so fairly newer members. Distance to church, 23% are 1 to 2 miles, 5 to 9 miles, 25%. You have a pretty big percentage that we're actually under 4 blocks. So when you're thinking about ministry, it's really a community-based ministry. You're not drawing in, unlike some other congregations, which may be more regional. Folks are driving, 15, 20 miles to church. It's really focused in on the community in and around the church. Attendance, everybody is pretty much a frequent attender, which is a once a month or more. Um, the majority of folks are either every week or all but about 4 weeks a year. We saw the attendance trends at the beginning. And then here are more demographics about ethnic background, level of education, um, and number of persons in the household. Here is the tenure, the percentage of folks doing daily devotions, the value of involvement and involvement beyond worship, um, your percentile rank in that comparative database. Uh, Again, some more statistics for those folks that like to dig into it about the household of the respondents. And then this page here is just information that was included in the data form that was sent to Holy Cow. And now we're going to move on to the transition profile. And this is information about how your members, their availability will be, their engagement and involvement during the transition, their feelings about the transition and trajectory of the ministry of St. Paul. So what we see here is folks responding. It would take a number of months to complete a pastoral transition. You have quite a few folks that are willing to be more involved, right? Or even much more involved. So that's wonderful to see. Number of additional responsibilities that may arise. Level of availability. You have folks that are saying 34% that will have more availability for any of those additional responsibilities. Folks willing to provide additional income for expenses and costs connected to the transition process. You have some folks, most of the folks are about the same. You do have 16% that said they would give more. So, and then we work our way down. During the transition, I'm thinking about exploring other churches. Really, a very small percentage say that they will take this opportunity to explore other churches. Only 5%, 7% are saying maybe I will. So really a rather small amount of folks. I believe the leadership at our church needs to be more representative of the congregation as a whole. You have 29 on the fence, 12% agree, but majority of folks are saying that they're comfortable with the leadership in the congregation, and we saw that response again in the body of the cat. I'm comfortable with the timing of the pastoral transition. I feel it's time for this change. We have 29% on the fence and 17% disagree. So what we take from that are there are quite a few people that are still at the time of this taking, so it's been a few months, are still feeling um, uncomfortable with this timing of transition. They're working through that. So, even though there are folks that are ready and fine and ready to move forward, it's just keeping in mind that there are some folks that are still not there yet. In the future, I believe the church should continue in the same overall direction that is taken in the recent past. We have 49% on the fence, 36% agree. My question in that, right? So we have those 50% that are on the fence. I'm wondering if that 50% is thinking, what does this mean, this overall direction, when we're moving toward a halftime call, right? So thinking about recent past, right? You've had a full-time pastor. What does it mean to continue in the direction we're currently in, right? So with a halftime call. And it may mean that some things will need to be adjusted permanently. So I know that you don't have a full-time interim. It's a good way of trying this out. What are some of the things that the congregation members and leaders are doing really well that could continue to be done by members and leaders? And what are some of the things specifically that you're going to be looking for a new pastor to take on in their role? I believe the next pastor we call should have approximately the same skills and responsibilities as a former pastor. 53% are on the fence, 40% are agreeing with that statement. So again, responsibilities will need clarification, matching those expectations with half-time ministry. Critical abilities for the next pastor. So I will say, I think every cat I've looked at has preaching as number one. So we're going to take that one as a grain of salt. Everybody wants a really good preacher. Your second priority there is for critical ability is pastoral care. That capacity to engage people empathetically and care for person in times of need. We saw this as an energy driver. So keeping that in mind, you have a care team as well, right? So how does this work together with the care team that is existing in a collaborative way? Third ability is strategic leadership, capacity to cast a vision and lead the church toward realization of the vision. Again, thinking about how is that skill utilized in a halftime ministry, and how you would collaborate with leaders. So when thinking about adding responsibilities to a pastor's plate, if the strategic leadership is super important, what are some of the things that can come off the plate so that strategic planning, casting vision, which it's a process and it takes a while to realize what are some of the things that will be supported by members of the congregation so that your pastor can focus in on this. Again, change management, capacity to lead a church through a significant and necessary period of change, collaborating with leaders on that. And then you'll see here teaching, training, capacity to deepen understanding, form character, and equip members with new skills. And I added these little arrows there because strategic leadership and change management, one person can't do that. You need a team. You need a group of folks that are moving those things forward. So thinking about priority for a new pastor is that being someone who can equip and can teach and can empower folks to do some of these things. Sixth is community catalyst. That was kind of included in your overall priorities, that networking, and how does that pastor network with folks in the community, but also equip and empower members to do that as well, right? So we're doing this together, thinking about collaboration. And then down lower, we're seeing that negotiate, resolve conflict, and administration as lower critical abilities. So something I just, down just to put it all together, what I'm wondering is what does a pastor look like that has these real skills and collaborative and relational leadership for your congregation, that ability to engage and equip and empower, to collectively discern and inspire and motivate folks. So I'm looking at, if you can see on my screen, I'm looking at all the typos. I will fix those when I send out the final annotated report. So that ends the body of the cat. I've included here what are some of the characteristics of thriving transformational mainline Protestant congregations. It's vital worship, a dedication to lifelong learning, spiritual formation that fits complex lifestyles, open leadership systems, quality relationships, and flexibility. And then in general, for healthy and vital ELCA Lutheran congregations, it is that spirit of involvement, right? Exceptional worship, developing people who feel called to ministry, that care, that concern to know what people are thinking, that open decision-making process, representative leadership, and dealing with conflict constructively. And you can see some of those things already in your cat, some of those things that you've already excelled in, and things that are areas that will need a little bit more attention as well. So I'm going to take this time quickly, if anybody has any questions about this part of the report.
Thank you.
Kim, on page 9, I'm just curiosity more than anything else. What's the owl with 140 next to it? No, I'm sorry, 29, 29,
So
29,
that those little owls, I'm trying to find one
20,
now.
yeah, 29.
Page 29. Okay. I'm going to make everybody seasick by scrolling, right? So that refers to that publication owl site. So any of those pages, you see the little owl in the corner, and that would be the page number to find information on that particular area of the assessment. So,
Okay, all right, got
yeah.
it. Thanks.
And it may be a little different because they've updated it, and I don't know if they've updated the page numbers in the cat, but it will be on or around that page number in that publication. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to switch to another document here. So you also received a transition summary and vital leader profile. I did not put annotation marks in here because it is more of a summary. My overall direction for this is designed for calling a full-time pastor. So when you are looking at any of these areas within this summary, also think in the back of your mind, what does a half-time pastor, we're thinking 20 hours, right? Half-time. What do they have the capacity for? What is an absolute priority that or expectation that the pastor will do? What is part of our shared ministry together? What are some things that are more collaborative? So when you look through this transition summary, what it does, it takes the information in the cat and puts it in a more of a narrative format and in different areas. So when folks are writing the MSP, they can take from this and almost plant it in different parts of the MSP almost directly. So the first area they talk about is your sense of identity and direction. What they're doing is looking at some priorities and taking into account drivers as well. So identities, direction, introduce when we're looking for investing energy, resources, and time in the future. Best practices in family ministry, exploring best practices, reaching out to people outside of the congregation, sharing the gospel, offering different models of education and spiritual formation, different models of community transformation. So when we're thinking about outreach and service and impact and justice and advocacy, providing opportunities for leaders and members to learn about different approaches for serving. Remedial issues. So these are issues. We didn't see anything really come up in your CAT that have as critical success factors. So those are areas that typically will rise to the top. The only real thing that we saw underneath that was the education piece. So education, we're also looking for that visioning, helping folks discern gifts. We saw that in the drivers, bringing out the best in everyone. And that is the relational piece. That is, a pastor who will have those one-to-one meetings, helping folks discern their gifts and getting them connected, because that value of involvement that spirit of involvement in your congregation is a driver of energy. So how are people supported in that? So thinking about that. Administrative issues, these are general transition activities, looking at policies, procedures, paperwork, all those P things that is required during a transition process. Making sure staffing is appropriate for the size. And then it does point out that your membership roll is 3 times as large as your worship attendance. So taking a look at that membership roll and confirming if folks are active or have moved away, just updating that. So change. Folks are fairly feeling positive about the overall direction. So there isn't this desire to let's start from the beginning, let's scrap everything, come up with our new mission or purpose. Feel like folks are feeling like, yes, this is the direction we want to still be going in. And then skills and responsibilities. So this is the one I want to kind of push back, more or less comfortable with the current set of skills and responsibilities for the pastor rector. So this is where we're looking at that through the lens of skills and capacities, but for half-time ministry, right? So not looking at the prior full-time capacity. We're looking at now what is an appropriate capacity for half-time. Opportunities and vulnerabilities, level of involvement is very high. Transition tasks, the availability is average. We just saw that. Giving will be about the same. And likelihood of visiting other churches is fairly low. Dealing with loss. So we did see in the transition profile that folks had varying degrees of comfort in the timing. So even as of, this time being, a few months into the transition, folks are still needing some time to process. So recognizing that there is that, about quarter of the congregation is still uncomfortable with the timing. Trust and leadership, there's a very high degree of trust and leadership. So making sure that you continue to reach out and provide opportunities for folks to provide inputs, sharing decisions, having that collaborative discernment process. So when we're thinking about the next pastor, so the culture, now they're going to take some of that information about the culture of the congregation. So appreciative of a variety of theological perspectives, intellectually resident. Well, that is a magi statement with a moderately progressive perspective. Knowledgeable regarding the dynamics of more of a pastoral sized church. Energized by a community focused congregation, then regionally focused. So things are happening, in the literally, on the Cape, on Cape Ann, in the neighborhood, attracted and being, book studies, and it's just kind of highlighting different education strategies, particularly for a magi culture. But I would also like to include some of that performance culture, which would be that creativity and the arts, because you have a little bit of that culture coming in into the magi culture. Context. This talks a little bit about the community itself. The culture is valuing exploration, dialogue, intellectual engagement, high level of vitality. And then here are some lists of abilities. So you can look through all, I don't need to go through all of these. These actually align with that critical ability profile, also with your priorities, your higher priorities, and with your drivers. So it's a mixture of that in there. And then leadership style, and this is something that I wasn't specifically indicated in the CAT data, but I mentioned that in my synopsis: leads by delegating authority, assigning responsibility, recognizing contributions of others. And I would say coaching, empowering, and equipping, accompanying. Those are some characteristics that for your congregation, especially a magi congregation with those performance culture mixed in, with a high level of vitality, and ministries that we already know that are vibrant. So that leadership style would fit well. And there we are. That comes to the end of that. Also included in your reports is an executive summary, which is a really short summary of drivers and priorities. They just list a few. But all in all, that is the result of the assessment. And I will stop sharing and we can take some time for questions and ponderings and concerns, if any. Does it sound like you? Does it sound like your congregation? Does it resonate? Are you resonating with that information? On the whole, it's a very, very positive report.
I'm very pleased with the report. I'm very excited to be part of a congregation that's so energized. That's one of the first things I identified when I came in, and to see that doesn't surprise me at all in the CAP, but to see the numbers as high as they were, I'm just real excited to see that.
I agree. I agree. Martha, what do you think?
I'm actually very pleased to see the outcome. One of the things that would be sort of interesting is the previous CAT, there was a strong indication that we were pastor-led.
Mhm.
And there's been observations that we are not as pastor-led, but more congregational-led. Do you see that from the context that you're reading?
Yeah, there was more of the clergy focus, the drivers. So I think that, when we were looking back at the drivers in 2021, and so there were worship drivers, there were clergy focused drivers, and I see more when we see more of that readiness for ministry, those drivers riding, there's a little bit of the clergy focus because there were a couple of drivers around interim pastor, so there's still that kind of looking at the pastor, right, and leadership, and but with the readiness for ministry, folks are like, oh, discerning gifts, I want to serve, right? I think moving in that trajectory, when you're calling a pastor, really leveraging that, like, how can we continue in that direction?
And I've seen an improvement in that since Pastor LaDonna left. There just seems to be, I know sometimes it doesn't feel like we've got the volunteers, but like this morning, poor Miranda came in a few minutes late to set up the altar, and there's like 3 people in there trying to figure out what to do.
I'm concerned. I mean, last time I was concerned about the conflict piece because I thought I was surprised by that when that hit us after that cat, um and I thought, what are they talking about? And now it seems to be, so much more positive. So I'm glad.
No.
But I also want to know, what did we do or go through to make that change? And is it more about some people have left who felt conflict, and we have more people, we have a lot of new people who maybe have come here and are really happy to be here? Um, or is there something that we should really be aware of? Because that bothered me last time.
Mhm.
Not that I did anything personally about it, but I wonder, as a congregation, how do we kind of make sure that we're looking, that we don't just kind of sit back and say, oh, everybody just loves it here. How do we keep going forward?
I think what bothered me about that, Miranda, is that it would have had to have been a high percentage of people that felt that way for it to be such a significant item on the cat.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if the questioning around that might have been worded in such a way, possibly, that people misunderstood what was being asked. And I don't know, Kim, if you have any thoughts on that since you've been doing this work for a while.
Yeah, I'm going to pull up the 2021. 1 minute. And we can look at that page because I didn't pull that one out from the 2021. We saw it in the drivers, but we didn't read. There we go.
And of course, what came up a lot during this cat was education, bringing in families and that type of thing. And it's not like we haven't been trying to do that for years. We just, it's just not a population that we seem to be able to bring in. Whoops.
Yeah, and I think it's thinking about, okay, who is here and what are those opportunities, the education? Are there any gaps right now for the folks that are here? Rather than building a program for folks that aren't here yet, right? Even though aspirationally you may want more families and children, but really thinking and speaking to the folks that are in the congregation and engaged in the, right, here we go with the conflict management. So what we saw here in 2021, there's a disturbing amount of conflict in our congregation. And what we're seeing in that was a driver of satisfaction, you had the majority of folks were on the strongly disagree, and disagreed, 10 to disagree. There was a bit, so you had some on the fence right there. And what a lot of times we see that come up, not because folks are in engaged in conflict at the moment. It can be there was residual feelings about a conflict situation that was not handled well. You know, like, and I call it kind of sensitivity to any disagreement, right? And that can come out as conflict avoidance, where folks just don't even say anything. They don't want to rock the boat, even though maybe somebody is stepping over the line or something like that. So we see that there's either history and there's sort of some scars, right, that haven't completely healed. And any inkling of disagreement or conflict can feel, you know, you can feel it within the congregation. So that's sometimes we'll see that come up in a cat, and until the congregation has really sort of talked about it and worked through it and developed healthier ways of addressing conflict, you'll see that kind of simmer there, right? The other one is, among most of our members, there's a healthy tolerance of differing opinions and beliefs. So that was a satisfaction driver. And we see in that one, you have tend to agree, you have those fence sitters, right? So the note there is something brewing, is something along there. Again, there might not have been a big disagreement about a specific thing, but there could have been that sensitivity that maybe we're not addressing something or handling it, and there's something's going on, right? Making us uncomfortable. And seeing that shift, you know, where folks are not, you know, it's not even showing up on the drivers in 2025. For me, what I would surmise is there has been some intentional work around how do we address conflict? Are we rather than maybe avoid it? You know, we're so sensitive, we're going to avoid it. Maybe we address things before they get into full-blown disagreement or conflict, and having healthier boundaries.
I think it was wonderful seeing the belief in the leadership. And I think this church council has worked so hard through all of these transitions, and Martha has been a wonderful leader in that regard.
Yeah, I agree.
So the conflict question was less prominent this time round, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not, when we talk about drivers, these are the things that like are really important for the congregation when they're overall, when they're feeling, you know, they're feeling that connection to God and one another, that sense of energy and motivation, and you know, that I call it the satisfaction. To me is more like shalom. I'm feeling at ease and peace and fulfilled and thriving, right? So those aren't even showing up, though any of those conflicts.
I think it's hopeful that, given the divisive, you know, climate of our country right now, that indicator is less prominent, not more, because, you know, the potential for there to be all kinds of conflict around politics is, you know, everywhere, right? I'm not confused, but I wish I knew more what people meant around educational opportunities, because for the size of our congregation, you know, we have a men's group, we have a women's book group, we have a women's retreat. We have 2 weeks ago, I missed last week, there were 16 people in Bible study. That's like what, a third of our worship attendance? I'm trying to figure out what more. And then we have Joyful Journey. We had 12 kids last night, which is our version of Sunday school here.
So
Just,
that's one thing that the follow-up meetings are gonna help us with.
Yeah.
We have these offerings, but it might
Yeah.
not be what the congregation is looking for. They're looking for something different. So it's great that we do what we do. But maybe those answers are around, they're looking for something else. So
mm,
we're gonna take this information, we're gonna
yeah.
have
Yeah.
some additional meetings, small group meetings like we did before we did the CAT.
Mhm.
We're gonna do that again after the CAT, and we can dig deep into some of those questions and try to find out. I
Mhm.
made a couple of notes about um, places we need to get more information, and education's one, worship experience is another.
Mhm.
Some of the transition stuff, readiness for ministry. So those are some things that we need to dig a little bit deeper in.
And yet, Thomas, and also we've had a workshop on the Holy Spirit. We've got another workshop coming up. All of those things are pretty darn well attended. And you know what I mean? I'm just puzzled. I'm not sure how thin we could spread ourselves. Maybe I'm just not understanding that question so well, but
This is Martha. Is there a possibility that people read the question as in, I'm very inspired by what we're getting for education, and the response we're seeing is people are very encouraged and committed to it, therefore they'd like to see even more? Because what we've done is more than double, in a sense, than what we were at 5 years ago in some ways.
Mhm.
right. And most of those, all of those are lay led, or we're retired pastors, but we're not counting on Thomas to do any of those. And plus, we have several people. We have Anne, who's taking part in synod opportunities. Christopher is taking part in educational opportunities outside of the church. So, I got a book. I'd love to. I might offer a book study at some point, but I've got one on my, front burner. But I'm not really sure how.
Yeah.
I kind of don't get that that's so high. They want more. I just really wonder if they're like, oh, we want a Sunday school like 25 years or 50 years ago. I don't know.
And that could be it. And I raised that in there because a lot of times
Yeah.
the response to that is really connected to, you know, a
But
vision
yeah,
of what church should be
yeah,
with, a kindergarten class of Sunday school,
yeah.
like first, second, third, fourth, fifth
Youth
grade,
group.
right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So that's where you dig in, right? Like,
Yeah.
are there really gaps, or is this nostalgia, right?
Mhm.
People are thinking about the heyday when we
Mhm.
had all of these classrooms filled with
Mhm.
different age groups.
Yeah.
And that's the conversation, and kind of
Mhm.
digging down a little bit. What do you mean by that? Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yep, that's exactly what it is.
I don't know if you heard Carl, but he said from the across the room, "Yep, that's exactly what it is."
Hi, Carl.
Hello.
Because it seems like there are, I mean, like even in the cat, there were opportunities for right? So
Yeah.
people are acknowledging there are opportunities.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would be just kind of having a conversation. What do you mean by this?
We have 18 people signed up for the women, 18 women signed up for the women's retreat as of today.
Wonderful,
That's a
wonderful.
lot.
But you know
I-
what? But under a survey, that's not going to fall under education. They're going to say, "Oh, that's a social thing, or it's parish life, or that's the fun of church."
Yeah. Yeah.
Not necessarily educational. So
Mhm.
that's where I tend to think a lot of it is, where is Sunday school class, and where is the junior high class or the middle school class, and some of those, like what we all wish there were, but is not necessarily happening
Let's dig
in other
into it.
ways.
Let's dig into it.
Yeah.
And another thing to explore, because the culture has moved toward that performance culture a little bit more, which is sort of known for the arts and creativity and sort of a different experiential sort of educational opportunities. So thinking about formation a little bit differently, like, it may address some of that too. Like, are there different ways that, like, how is serving in our community part of our formation? Like playing with that, or direct service, working one-on-one with somebody, in the community. How is that? So it could be playing with that a little bit.
And I think those things have increased too in the last couple of years. I'm a little puzzled. I mean, I think the size of our congregation, you could get spread too thin too,
And that's the reality, is you also want to make sure all of your programs are sort of in alignment. You're not, you know, 400 different ministries all over the place.
Yeah.
What are you doing well, and really lean into the strengths of your congregation.
And the timing of this is good. So before I get into that, Ann Wheeler's got a comment in the chat here. She's without a mic. But she said about the education piece, the thought may be that if we can do Sunday school, the families will come.
That ship has sailed, honey.
Yeah, I agree, but we
Yeah, I know.
I don't know what people think in the congregation. We'll have to dig into that. But the timing of this is good, I think, because we're coming up on a planned retreat with the council, and this could help focus some of that retreat in areas that we want to address or whatever. But if nothing else, it'll be good conversation during the retreat.
I'm a little surprised. I'm thrilled that people have a high satisfaction with music and worship. But man, I mean, our choir is down to like 4 people sometimes. And we have a resource to bolster that. And I don't know. I think that's such an important part of worship, and nothing against thank God 4 people are doing it, or 5. But we're losing more people than gaining in the choir. We did just gain 1 person. I think that's got to be addressed. More. I mean, we have a $5,000 grant. How can we get people from the outside in? There's a Christian college in town.
Yeah, I think that's a conversation for the cottage meetings, or maybe bring up with council, or I've talked to Ted about it, but.
Just one last thing I hope comes up at the retreat. I really think we got to get more organized about missions, because, we've just had a new couple come in, and they keep saying, like, well, is there a committee, or how do you know when there's going to be a mission outreach, or who brings up a mission outreach? And we've been casual about it, and we've done loads of things: collection for Guatemala, for Robin's trip to Africa, for the summer lunch program, for Unity. But we really need to have some coordination with that, and a more direct path to how, if you want to bring in a missions opportunity, who decides that, what's the priorities. I really love to see that in the next year.
One thing I was thinking about is the fact that the congregation is looking for more young kids. I wonder if one way to learn more about that is to look at other churches in the area. A friend at the Baptist Church in Rockport they have a fairly large contingent of kids,
Yeah.
with work at it with, summer the Bible study with the blow up thing and nighttime movies outside in the park. So, maybe there's some lessons to be learned from other churches.
Mhm. And there are always opportunities to partner, right? It is a sort of by virtue of everybody being on Cape Ann area, a tight-knit community. You can't spread out too far, right? But like opportunities, within a few miles of collaborating and partnering with other congregations, not only like having those conversations, but what, could we do VBS together, or could we do youth group together? And if not already, right? Um, yeah. And I mean, there are other opportunities to collaborate, but typically with the children's and youth ministry, it's low hanging fruit. People are more motivated. Any other questions about the data or?
Is there some better work that the care team can be doing?
Yeah, again, I think that'll come out during our cottage meetings
Okay.
if there's something else that the congregation is looking for there. I don't think that we can pull that out of this data.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me
I
about the
think
cottage meetings. Excuse me. Sorry. What are there's going to be small group meetings. Excuse me if I interrupted you, I think, Miranda, but you keep talking about cottage meetings. When is that?
Yeah, that's gonna happen. The transition team's got to get together and we got to start communicating this information to the congregation. And we're gonna start setting up meetings to start talking about these areas that we've got questions about, like what
Mhm.
else can the care team be doing as far as from the pastoral care standpoint, the worship
Mhm.
experience, the transition areas that we talked about,
Mhm.
mission, ministry readiness, educational
Mhm.
opportunities, discerning God's gifts,
Mhm.
things like that. We need to find out what the congregation means when they answered this way. And so
Mhm.
those cottage meetings is just a term. It's cute because they both start with a C. No, um, it's it's just a different way to say small group meetings. Um, I think the term cottage was coined because some of the meetings are done and can be done in people's homes.
Mhm.
Or Lutherans like Methodists like to, eat and have meetings around food.
Yes, we do.
We also have taken in, I should be quiet, but we've had how many baptisms? New members. There are 3 people I'm aware of that I think are gonna kind of ready to join in the next season. I mean, without a pastor, we've had all that.
mm,
A new members class is an education opportunity, is it not?
mhm.
Baptism prep, I don't know.
Yeah, all of those. Every age and stage. Those are stage of life, right? And
Yeah, right.
And Anne, actually, maybe you could put this in chat. How many surveys were sent out? And I believe I heard 79 were completed.
Yeah. It's in the church data form at the end of the CAT. It'll give you those numbers. Yep. And Marion, I will say that the under the hospitality index, um, the one about pastoral care and caring for times of need, the overwhelming response, it was over 70% of folks strongly agreed that that was being done well. So I would say keep going.
Thank you.
Whatever you're doing, folks are very, very appreciative. But I think it's a strong ministry, so it's something to keep in mind. I know sometimes in a transition process, we'll like put extra energy into certain ministries with the thinking, oh, when the pastor comes, we're going to put this on the shelf, right? But I think for this congregation, that is such a strong ministry, indicated that in the response on the cat, definitely leaning into that and continuing that ministry.
Kim, I think you did a great job pulling all this together, and thank
Oh,
you so much for all of the work it takes to summarize all of this data, and then also basically just make the notes that we can work from on the document. So thank you so very
Yeah.
much, Kim, for your commitment to us, this little church over here on the North Shore. You seem to, obviously, by the way you conveyed your cat, you know us well. You know a lot about us, and that I can sense a bit of enthusiasm about us, even though that we're little, but it's a little engine that's still climbing.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I love to share positive reports, but it is a testament to your congregation and your members. Wonderful work that you've all done thus far. And I expect even more wonderful things in the future. As Scott said, with faith like a mustard seed, let's move some mountains and and all of that. So yeah, if there are any other questions, you all know where to find me. I'd be happy to jump on another Zoom or, answer questions by email or phone as well. I'll clean up the report a little bit. I hate typos, and I'm like, oh, I spotted those, and I'll send that copy off, the cleaned up copy off shortly.
Before you go, Kim, the impatient United Methodist pastor who says, goodbye one Sunday and the new pastor comes the next Sunday. How much longer is this going to take?
It takes as long as it takes. That's going to be my diplomatic answer. It takes as long as you need to take. So there you go.
Great answer.
We're
Thank you,
trusting in the
Kim.
Holy Spirit to lead us and guide us. So
Thank you.
amen to that. All right. Well, with that, thank you all, and I will be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, everybody, for hanging out there and sticking with a 2-hour meeting. It's important. Thank you.